Hi, in this video, we're going to look at the idea of full range leadership. It originally came from research into American politicians, and it was noticed that they tended to fall into two distinct camps. There were those that tended to be transactional, so they got things done by doing deals, by setting clear expectations and negotiating agreements. The other group were described as transformational because they provided a vision and they used their charisma to inspire others, which translated then into votes at the ballot box and delivery of their vision. It's worth noting that some people are transformational. In other words, they are inherently charismatic, visionary, inspirational, good at discourse and at building relationships. Whilst other people are more transactional, they tend to have a focus for facts and figures and then doing deals or forming collaborations. It's also true that some jobs and some situations lend themselves better to being transactional. So think perhaps about the public sector, where you need to engender support for an idea before it gains traction. While some jobs and situations lend themselves perhaps to being more transformational. So you might think about a marketing role where clearly ideas and visions are going to be important. You can see here the idea of transformational leadership from Bass is that superior leadership performance occurs when leaders broaden and elevate the interests of their employees. In other words, they're engaging them in the wider context of the organisation, its purpose, rather than simply focusing on an individual's role. They generate awareness and acceptance of the purpose and mission of the group. So what is the whole team there to achieve? And also, when they stir their employees to look beyond their own self-interest. So in other words, engage them in the group's interest, in the group's identity, in moving forward the ideas that the organisation wants to achieve. It's important to note that whilst transformational leadership is believed to be important, you also need to make sure that the transactions are being taken care of to support the achievement of the vision, and vice versa. Both components need to be looked after by you or someone else so that you can feel confident about getting the job done. So let's look at the full range of leadership approaches. Firstly, let's touch on laissez-faire. Now, laissez-faire is about abdicating your leadership responsibilities. Here it's about being in the role of leader or being perceived as leader within a particular situation, but failing to act. And the risk here is that someone else will step in because people seek leadership. So we know that the more laissez-faire, that is, the more passive you are in your leadership, then the more likely people will see you as having lower integrity because they don't understand why you are in that position but not providing leadership. They become suspicious of you and your motivations. So clearly, laissez-faire is about non-leadership and to be avoided, though it's worth considering whether any part of what you do or don't do could be construed as laissez-faire. Let's look at this idea of transactions. So transactions could be corrective or constructive. Now, corrective actions are about noticing and fixing mistakes. It's about seeing exceptions from the required standard of performance that the leader steps in and corrects those exceptions. So it's also an opportunity to re-articulate or restate the expectations of the transaction. Now, the more that a leader does corrective transactions, performance and motivation invariably go down. So whilst it may be a necessary component, and corrective transactions are sometimes required, if they dominate, then people may misinterpret your motivations. Now, constructive transactions are about looking forwards and about developing relationships and expectations that build the type of future that you want to see. The rewards that are received are contingent upon performing in a particular way. So this may be about standards of performance, or it might be about engagement with a culture or set of behaviours. So constructive transactions typically result in higher or improved performance. So in terms of transactional leadership and getting things done, far better to be constructive than corrective. So through transactional activity, we'll get the job done. But what if we want to instill those things that will transform or transcend performance within the organisation? Let's look at transformational actions. Firstly, if you want people to perform beyond expectations, you must be individually considerate. In other words, when Bassanio-Voglio looked at all the things that we do in leadership roles and identified individual consideration, they believed this was fundamental because it's about the development of people and the consideration of their particular needs and circumstances. Next, we'd think about how to stimulate other people to think differently about what needs to happen. Through this intellectual stimulation, leadership is about asking questions to gain deeper insight into how and why things need to be improved. This asking of questions is part of the process of sense making by the leader, so that they're then able to use that information to make sense for others, or sense giving, as we call it in leadership. And this sense making and sense giving are the essence of leadership. Now, humour and positive emotion are also components of bringing people on board in this way, along with the use of metaphors and other kinds of symbolic language to engage people in the issues that the organisation faces. The next point is to be inspirational and visionary. It's about having a discourse and a language that shares a clear vision and makes it accessible to others through stories, fables, quotations, and so on that are sense-giving. Visualizing a future and articulating it to others is a key component of what we're trying to achieve here. And this inspiration to get on board and be a part of the team are essential elements. Finally, idealized influence is about role modeling and showing the behaviors that we want people to emulate. It's about demonstrating integrity and building trust by showing these sort of out of the ordinary behaviors, which often result in the leader being seen as charismatic. So this full range of options are available to us as we lead within organisations. So it's worth just looking at one or two of the differences between them. So we know that transactional leadership has the lesser impact upon performance. This is about the bare bones of leadership. It's about getting the task done. Transactional leadership is absolutely necessary, but it's not sufficient on its own in order to inspire people to become a part of a growing, developing organisation. We acknowledge that many transactions are legal obligations and therefore they are compulsory. These are things that we have to do just to be compliant with laws and obligations in the countries in which we operate. And we also acknowledge that constructive transactions are more effective than corrective transactions. But overall, we need to marry this with a transformational approach to leadership. So here we're talking about all leadership being based upon a foundation of transactions, but moving this to the next level through transformational leadership, which augments the effect of those transactional actions. It's important to recognise here that managers and leaders can be transactional, but do it in a transformational way. So to think about how to implement each of those transformational approaches. And we also know that transformational leadership can be learned. So we're going to look at Bassanio's 4 I's in a little bit more detail. The first of which is idealized influence. And here we know that this is about being an ideal role model through ethical and moral behaviours within the organisation. It's about providing a consistent and clear set of vision, mission, values and behaviours that people are expected to buy into, adopt and deliver against. It's about going deeper than the day-to-day task. It's about providing meaning and purpose for employees. Inspirational motivation then is about articulating that inspiring and appealing vision of the organisation. It's about giving people purpose. It's about sense giving for the organisation. We can motivate others to put organisational interest before self-interest and to perform beyond expectations. Intellectual stimulation then is about innovation and creativity. It's about spearheading these in everything that we do in the organisation. It's about challenging assumptions and about questioning why things are done in a particular way. At the same time as encouraging other people within the organisation to see what they are doing from new perspectives and for them themselves to identify areas for improvement, ways to enhance their own role. And finally, individualized consideration. And here it's about demonstrating a genuine concern for and attending to the needs and feelings of employees, about developing others to their highest level of ability through mentoring and coaching. Developing this capability in your leadership means that you're more likely to engage your team and bring them with you as a part of growing the organisation and delivering on its vision, mission and purpose.